That I would give a quick intro to Roland. So Roland himself, he led the Global Culture Transformation Program at Innogy. He is also a highly respected leader in the renewable energy industry and has worked as a partner at Accenture before joining Innogy at the time. Then also before he started his current company, the Trusted Advisors, he lived, and that's also where we actually met Roland, in Palo Alto in California, and worked there as a board member for the company called Plus. Plus was a transformation company, an app basically to support transformation in the digital world, really very much focusing on people. So with this short introduction, I would just hand over to Roland. Roland, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Marc. And I really have to thank you guys, Dimitri and Marc, and the whole team of Advisor AG, to have me to share my experiences. And I think my gratitude goes to you guys because you didn't cancel the event, which was seen as a normal speech. You really tried hard and said, okay, if times are changing, let's do it. Let's do it in a different way. Let's run a Zoom session. And I'm super curious, to be quite honest. It's my first Zoom session with this amount of participants. I think we have to rethink corporate culture in days like this massively. So the title can't be better, actually. And yeah, I'm pretty happy to be back in Europe from US in times like this. You know, I transferred over at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the year. And given the situation now, I think Europe is actually ahead, and that makes me feel really, really good. Yeah, I want to dive a little bit into the topic of corporate and cultural transformation today. But the way how we run the session today is very new for me. Normally I see the audience, and you know, seeing the audience gives you a lot of information, which I don't see you guys, unfortunately, today. Secondly, normally I'm sitting now, which is also different. And I really hope I can perform in this session as you expect in order to provide you also a good experience. But of course, if you might want to give me feedback at the end, or drop me a note afterwards, what I can improve, or what I could do more intensively, or what I should stop doing, that would be super helpful, because for me, this is the first time that I run in this way, a bit of a prototype, and my old behaviors also kick in. So I'm curious and very grateful, obviously, if you give me and provide me feedback after the session. I thought a lot about the session today because the times are very different. So I thought I start with a question. And the question is actually very simple. Imagine our session today runs really well. How would people around you notice this tomorrow? What would they see? And maybe you pause there for a moment. But then also in times like this, what if you imagine yourself that you are the change you want to see in people? How does this make you feel? And let's pause here for a moment, because what I have done now is a couple of tricks which are very important when we talk about behavioral change, when we talk about neuroscience, and we talk about the learnings. I have actually done 3 things. And forgive me for doing it, but you can try it out with people around you in the next couple of days. If you remember the first question I asked you, imagine this session runs really well, how would people tomorrow notice? And very, very likely, you created a picture of yourself tomorrow. And that's what we call leading from the future. The idea behind this is that our brain is the most creative in a positive future. And what I have done is, by structuring the question in a certain way, I have primed your brain positively by saying, imagine the session runs really well. So your brain is already positively primed. And then I have brought you into the future tomorrow, and I have changed the perspective onto you. How would other people notice? So you start to build pictures, you start to build images of yourself, very likely. And that's how we normally run sessions. That's what we try to do. We try to bring people into a positive future and take the pictures, bring them in the here and now, and then start to work on these elements which they picture in the future. Having said this, the here and now today is awkward. I think our life changed within weeks dramatically, absolutely dramatically. And suddenly we all are in a situation where we have to learn extremely quickly how do we master the unknown, how we are getting comfortable with discomfort. You know, we're going out on the streets, we don't know how this whole thing works. Some people who might have had a flu are thinking about, did I have Corona already or not? Our complete life has changed dramatically. And the interesting thing is also, what can we learn out of these situations? What happens with people in these situations? How do they behave? And how can we learn from these behaviors if we are in situations that we want to run a transformation or a cultural transformation? What can we take out of it? Now, coming from the utility industry, situations where everything is turned upside down, where suddenly the normal world around you doesn't work anymore, the utility industry, for example, has experienced a couple of years ago. I have an example here where we suddenly realized that we had negative electricity prices. And what this means, if you have negative electricity prices, is basically taking energy off the grid you're getting paid for. So if you're lucky and you sit in Switzerland and you have the wonderful situation that you have one of these hydro pump power plants in the Alps pumping the water up, you get paid for because you're taking electricity out of the grid. And luckily, if you then let the water running down and create new energy, you earn twice. But of course, if you're running big power plants, that's a very, very difficult situation. And the challenge is then, what are you going to do? How would you change? And the question is then also, in what direction do you change? And how can you make it sustainable? Let me share with you one very simple example from the utility industry. If you think about what we do today is basically we have created big power plants, and we're shipping the electrons from these power plants to the customers. That's a very simple business model. At the end of the day, the important thing with this business model is that you're sitting on the source, you're having the assets, and you're shipping the electrons over the grid. The grid always has to be stable, so you continuously ship your stuff and they're getting paid for it. Now, imagine for a moment the electron which is being shipped over the grid is for free. It doesn't cost anything anymore. Then the business model is very quickly, totally, utterly dead. And you have to think about what happens, and this happens today, that the information around the electron is more valuable than the electron itself. Why? There are currently solutions in place which are able to read out of the frequency changes of your electricity consumption which device you're switching on and off at home. So suddenly, the information which these electrons deliver is much more important than the electron itself. Because of course you get customer insights, you can offer services, and whoever is in the digital space, you know that information is basically the gold of the past. So suddenly you're sitting in a large corporate or in a large utility company, your key competence is building and running stable grid. So your whole system is built around stability. You're having large power plants and you're realizing the world is going to look very, very differently. Because in a world where the information is the new value pool, in a world where digital is the new way how to reach the customers, what happens is that the way of working changes dramatically. Because If you're in the digital space, for example, rapid prototyping is key. Design thinking is key. You want to get the solution out and you want to iterate to improve, and 70% is enough, and then you learn with the customer. But your mindset is completely different, because when you're running power plants, you don't want to do rapid prototyping, right? It's like, that's a completely different world. So how can you sustainably change a system like this? And what we are seeing today, we are seeing things in the current crisis, that systems are not changing, that some people are not changing. We are still having Corona parties where people meet up, despite all information they have, despite all warnings, they still show their own behaviors. Why is this the case? Why do people not want to change? Why do they want to keep their old behaviors? Why do they are saying, you know, this is the way how things work here? And in order to understand this, we have to look a little bit what neuroscience is teaching us. And neuroscience is teaching us a couple of very interesting things. Number one, our brain just wants to feel good. And what feeling good for the brain means is just not using a lot of energy. Because imagine your whole system is basically energy, and your brain consumes 20% of this. Now, very importantly, the currency of energy within your system is carbohydrates. That's why, by the way, you love chocolate, which is obviously also a good business model in Switzerland. But the brain also tries to optimize in order to use or not use energy. So it will take shortcuts. And you can test this out with your friends, how much energy the brain uses and what happens with your body if the brain uses a lot of energy. So for example, if you go for a walk with your friends and you ask your friend, how much is 17 by 32? What very likely will happen when they start to calculate, they will stop walking, because the brain uses so much energy for the calculation that for the simple process of walking is not enough energy left. And there is a fantastic book out from Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And he speaks about system 1 and system 2, and there are a number of examples in there, how you learn when you are estimating instead of thinking, because it's less energy, and because the brain starts to optimize itself. There are a number of really great examples. And this is also, by the way, the reason why the brain likes to predict the future, because it's much easier. So if you observe yourself, if you're, for example, meeting a friend, or if you are in your company trying to change something, it's very likely that you will predict behaviors of other people and stop doing it because you think it doesn't make any way sense. So the next time when you think about, or when you have the feeling this person will not change, or when I do something different, it doesn't matter, start to observe the reality in the here and now, what really is, because your brain will definitely fool you right, left, and center in order to save energy. The second thing, which is very important for behavioral change, is the fact, what they say in neuroscience, what fires together wires together. If you think about the neurons in your brain, as more they are used, as more intensively they are connecting, as thicker these connections get, as easier it is for electrons between the neurons to run through. So like highways are existing, or like maps. For example, maps, you don't think about maps for movements. And subconsciously, or these maps are operating completely autonomous. How you can try it out easily, if you take your hands and if you fold them, it feels quite comfortable. But if you put the hands out and fold it in the other way, you will realize how difficult it actually is. And that's exactly the point. For the brain, moving it into the other direction means energy, because it has to go through new wiring in the brain. And that's why the brain will avoid it. So the normal movement is coming in 100,000 of times. You don't have to think about anymore. And the same happens with your behaviors. There is a couple of other things which happens with behaviors, but that's one of them. For example, if you want to try something out, and if you're right-handed, start to brush your teeth with the left hand. Besides the fact that you will experience behavioral change in a very interesting way, it will also help you on the long run, maybe to become more creative, because the left hand is wired to the right brain where the creativity sits. So if you're up for a 30-day challenge, try to brush your teeth with left hand for a month and see what happens. So that's the wiring and the maps. The third thing, which is very important and which is very strong currently in our society, is social conformity. We all want to be liked. We are a communal species. We are basically a herd. And we want to be liked, and subconsciously we act like people around us are acting. We don't even recognize this anymore. Sometimes it's also called biasing your decisions. So for example, if you're in a meeting and on a flip chart you have a scale from 1 to 5, and you ask people to mark on this scale, whatever the question is, where they are, the challenge you will face is that the first one who makes the cross will direct all the others. All the others will subconsciously gravitate into this direction where the first one made the cross. Or for example, if hierarchy is in the room and the boss makes the first cross, all the others will tend over there. And the reason for this is the fact that our brain is wired in a way that we enjoy social conformity. So if you keep these three elements in mind, because they apply to everyone, and we will come back later to this, there is another element which is directly related to the social conformity, which is actually happening in organizations, and it's actually really keeping people away from changing. And I'm not sure if you ever heard about the experiment with the chimpanzees in a cage. But if you think about for a moment that culture is behavioralized values or mental models, so mental models in an organization translated into actual behaviors, and if a lot of people do this, then you form basically culture. So these mental models are pretty tricky because they are not explicit, they are implicit in the organization. They are not outspoken. The most known comment where you identify a mental model is, that's the way how we do things here. And to give an example, how they tried in a psychological experiment, which unfortunately is not documented very well, but it's a very good one, shows how mental models work. What they tried is, they put 4 chimpanzees in a cage. They put a ladder in there, and on the top of the ladder they put a banana. So what will the chimpanzees do? They will try to run up and get the banana. Whenever they tried this, the guys outside used a huge fire brigade water hose and basically sprayed the chimpanzees from the ladder. So after a while, the chimpanzees didn't go up there, and because they were afraid of the fire brigade water hose. So what the guys did is, they took one of the chimpanzees out and replaced the chimpanzee with a new one. The new one obviously didn't know anything from the fire brigade water hose. So what did the new one try? Run to the ladder and try to get up to the banana. And interestingly, the other 3 chimpanzees held him back. They didn't want that this new chimpanzee is running up the ladder. In this experiment, after a while, they have exchanged all 4 chimpanzees, so none of the chimpanzees ever experienced the water hose, but none of them went up the ladder. And that's a mental model. That's a mental model which is in a community, which is sitting there. And these mental models are part of our tribal behavior. And you will find this also in organizations. And these are most of the time the most difficult blockers in order to run transformations in order to make transformations successful. Why? Because whenever you try to change something, the system will incentivize you or will try to make you behave differently according to the mental models. We have this in our society, of course, and you know, the society in California is different than the society here in Europe, and that's definitely driven by mental models, but we have this also in organizations. And these mental models on an organization levels are working on your team and then are working on you. So if you join an organization, after 1 year, the likelihood that you behave like all the others behaving is very, very high. Whether these mental models which are driving your behavior are good ones or bad ones depends on the situation around. And sometimes they really hinder change. And in this situation, we call them blocking patterns. I have listed 4 examples here, which are real examples from an organization. The first one we found was, I don't give critical feedback. So what you basically have is vertical power distance. You continuously promote the experts until the best expert is on the top. What happens when you do this over a long period, the mental model that the best expert is on the top will simply remain in the organization, which leads to the fact that no one on the bottom will give critical feedback upwards, which at the end of the day is not only vertical power distance or hierarchy, it's also a distance from the real world. The top doesn't know anymore what's happening on the ground. Another typical one is, I lead my area, but not the whole company, silo thinking. Of course, this is also driven by tribal behavior, but at the end of the day, sometimes, like in the utility industry where you're regulated on both sides of the business, the only way you can optimize yourself is against your colleague. So you start to show silo thinking and this behavior. Another very interesting one, definitely with regards to change, is I stay below the radar and wait until it's over. It's like, you know, the famous lean back, bend forward process. So you're working on your computer, there's an initiative from the headquarter coming, you're leaning back, you let it pass, and then you lean forward and work again as if nothing happens. That's meaning not holding the boundaries. It doesn't matter if you're a high or a low performer, there's no difference. And the last one we found in an organization is no time for reflection and outward orientation. Leaders asking the question, I need direction, whereabout as a leader, you actually should give direction. And the reason why this is happening is you're so busy with yourself internally that you do not recognize anymore what's happening in the outside world. Now think about these mental models are driving behaviors because they are in the organization. They are, whenever they are happening, they're happening on the team level and on the me level. And on the me level, when you show this behavior, your team will follow you, and that's how the organization will also react. And if you want to really successfully run a cultural transformation, if you do not know what your mental models are, the likelihood that you fail is very, very high. So what can you do? At the end of the day, when you really want to try and lead through a transformation, what has to happen is that besides the fact that you can also the situation that the mindset or mental model change, like a lot of things are happening now in our society where mental models are shifting, you can start by changing your behavior. Because if you change your behavior, the behavior of the team will change, the behavior of the organization will change. So let me give you a very concrete example. What we tried out, what actually really worked well. And that is, for example, when you have this vertical power distance, this hierarchy, and the top doesn't know anymore what's happening on the ground. What we started to do with these leaders, and we call these micro interventions, we started to help them to change their behavior in a way that we asked them to do so-called Gemba walks. Gemba is a word from the lean management and means go where the action is. So if you take a Toyota manager in a factory, he's basically every week a few hours on the shop floor with the people he's directly connecting. So we started to ask the leaders who are on the top to do 2 or 3 times per week a so-called Gemba walk. Just spend 20, 30, 45 minutes on the ground, on the shop floor, with the people in your department, connect with them and see and understand. Don't solve problems, just see and understand. So they started, we asked them how many they want to do, so they started maybe to do 2 or 3 per week. And the important thing is that you do it for an ongoing time. So what happened was when they started to do these Gemba walks, number one, they created a much better understanding of what's happening on the ground. Number two, they started to create networks in the organization. Networks also with people they could ask later in case they had questions. Number three, it was a joy for them because, you know, being in the operations normally is a great thing. But more importantly, the guys in the middle who normally only try to avoid bad information coming up to the top, and we call this green disease. You know, a project is red at the bottom, and then as longer it travels up in the organization, it gets greener and greener, and on the top everything is all right. These guys in the middle management got stressed out because suddenly the top knew a lot more than the bottom, so they started to change and started to do Gemba walks. And that's basically how you can run these transformations if you start consciously, when you know which mental models you have, overlay them with behaviors which are breaking these mental models and help people in order to try this more and more in order to be able to basically make this behavior sustainable and change the organization. Having said this, one key element in this whole process is to measure. And why is measuring so important? Our brain is, again, as I said, wired in a way that it's reducing energy consumption. It tries to optimize energy consumption. And measuring is creating conscious contact with reality. And there are 3 elements which are vital in measuring in order to drive sustainable behavioral change. The first one is immediate rewards. Our brain enjoys immediate rewards a lot more than long-term rewards because long-term rewards are uncertain. If they are uncertain, the brain doesn't like it. So it will take a short-term reward much more intensively and likely than a long-term reward. The second one is progress monitoring. The brain is, because it is also trying to get uncertainty out of the way, it's a lot better encoding information which are related to a positive progress instead of negative warnings or threats. There's a very famous example where doctors asked patients who are very likely to get a heart attack, they asked them to change within the next year their way of living because if they don't, the likelihood that they die is very high. 8 out of these 10 people died within a year. They did not change their behaviors. And the doctors were pretty upset about this because it's a real threat, and it didn't lead to any behavioral change. So what they tried to do is they tried another way, and the way was asking them, what could you do if you live longer than a year? And you know, people started to say, playing soccer with my grandchild, traveling the world, whatever. And interestingly, in this situation, 8 out of 10 people survived the first year. And the reason is because also driving this behavioral change, the brain is a lot better encoding positive progress than warnings and threats. And the third one, which is seeing today massively, is social incentivization. And I will come back to this a little bit later. But we are more willing to change if if we are liked and respected and acknowledged with this change in our community or in our tribe. And companies are already using all of this today. That's not use. I have an example of an energy bill here, which if you understand what's behind this setup, it's actually really well done. So what you see on the three bars, the blue one, the gray one, and the green one on the left top, it's basically social incentivization. It's showing your position compared to the rest of the population, and it's showing you the best one. So what's happening is you're pretty happy because you're seeing you're not in the worst case, you're better than the average. But then you also see there's someone better and you are interested to come there. What you also see is the immediate reward. You get the good sticker. But what's even better on this good sticker, what's even better is the fact that you can already see the 2 smileys where you could come. So you get the immediate reward, and on the bottom, you have the process monitoring, how you're going. So this invoice is set up in order to drive positive behavioral change. And people really change getting these informations. What we know and what we have learned in the whole transformation we did over the last years, it works. It really works, and you can try it out with yourself. There's only one challenge which remains in transformations and in organizations, and that's you have to scale it. If you're not able to scale behavioral change, and you remember the mental models, and you remember the fact that your brain is optimized to reduce energy, all these mechanisms will work against you. So whatever you do, however you run this transformation, it has to be very simple, it has to be very practical and experiential. Because experiential means if you fold your arms, you will never forget this, and as more often you do it, you will rewire your brain. And the same happens in organizations. When you reach out to your colleagues, because, I mean, think about, when was the last time you actually left your company with a problem you have and went to another company in order to understand and experience how they are solving it? That's what we call outward orientation. Or when was the last time you consciously spent time on the shop floor or consciously spent time with another in another department? Or in terms of silo thinking, when was the last time one of your peers observed one of your meetings, or you observed one of the meetings of your peers? These are all little things. If you start to do them, you can scale them easily because they are simple. They are experiential, so your brain will rewire, and over time you actually can shift a whole organization. And hopefully you create a lot of business impact with this. Now, what do we learn from Corona today? If you look around, we learned 2 things, which are also important in terms of cultural transformations in an organization. There is simple contagion and there is complex contagion. The virus itself is simple. It doesn't need a lot. It goes from person to person. It requires weak social ties. It just spreads. And the only way how the virus gets successful is spreading as quickly as possible with a high amount of people. And that's what we try, thank God, to avoid. And governments are, of course, acting differently. Again, there are mental models behind which are driving their decisions. But overall, I think we are acting pretty well currently. But we also see another behavior, which is very interesting, which is called complex contagion. And that's what's happening with us in social media. Complex contagion basically means it doesn't require weak social ties. It happens within groups. You do what your tribe or what your group is doing. And as more often you see these things happening in your environment or in your tribe, as more likely you are to do it. And this is the reason why people start to go crazy and shop very quickly a lot of things like panicking, or why people, for whatever reason, are buying massive amounts of toilet paper. The reason is, in your tribe, you see this happening a couple of times. You see it happening from people you trust. So suddenly, you don't think properly anymore. You just drive your behavior, how the other colleagues or how your other tribal members and members of the tribe are behaving. And that's very interesting. And whenever you tend in yourself to do something which you are not sure about, think about why you're doing it. Think about, is it maybe trouble? Is it maybe complex contagion? Have you seen it with others? Is it really necessary? So that's what's currently, I think, very, very strongly seen in our environment. And that's also the moment where we should pause for a moment and really think, do we really need this? Or what can I do differently in order to help other people to change towards a positive behavior or a different behavior? Yeah, with this, I'm more or less at the end of my first Zoom speech. I would like to end with a question, and I would like to take you in a positive future. So if you imagine for a moment we are seeing each other in December 2020, what will you tell us you have consciously changed starting in March in your daily way of working to increase your performance, and how did you measure the improvement? Thank you very much, and I hope you stay safe and healthy, and my understanding is we have a bit of time for questions now.
Wow, what a download, Roland. Thanks a lot for this. I think judging from the number of people who still here, i.e. did never leave, I can already tell you now the first measurement for your speech is definitely successful. So the results, the instant results show that. We didn't get any question until almost the very end. You can also now, if you want, click at the chat box at the bottom and just ask more questions to Roland. We just have one already received. I don't know, Roland, if you already see it.
No, I think I have to. I would have to open the chat box.
Yeah, so the first question from Dimitri was, and I think the question came in around the time where you were on the haircut of the boy slide, and it's around the reward if it's stable, that variable rewards are more powerful than stable ones. Like that stable rewards are not so impactful as when you keep the rewards variable.
Yeah, definitely. If you if you have a continuous expected result, it becomes a routine, and possibly the chemistry in your brain is not reacting as intensively as if the immediate reward is differently. If you think about when you make something, or when something happens for the very first time, you're able to, I don't know, ski the first time a certain slope, or when you cycle the first time, whatever, when it happens, specific chemicals will be released in your brain, which give you a really great feeling. If the reward becomes stable and a routine, these chemicals will not be released anymore, and therefore variability is definitely good. The question is then, it's always the dose which makes the medicine, I guess.
Okay, good. Then a second question from Martin coming in around that you mentioned many so I moved to scientific resources, right across. Is there some that you could elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, if you don't wanna know more about this topic, then there are a couple of really great books out. One is, of course, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. This is definitely a great source of knowledge and inspiration.
Yeah.
There is a couple of really great TED Talks. There's David Rock, Brain at Work, fantastic book, easy to read, good fun and great learnings. And once you go into this topic, you will find a lot of different sources, but these ones are really fantastic. And then there's, of course, Otto Schama, Leading from the Future. And I would, these three, if you work with these three or read these three, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Okay, cool. So it seems really the interest to be there to get more of that list of literature. Also, Marie-Françoise is asking if you can share the slides, and two, if you're happy to share some of that literature.
Yeah, okay. More than happy to, definitely. And sorry that I speeded through the presentation. I think I also have to adjust speech, and maybe next time we ask for questions in between to give the audience the option to also pause for a moment between the slides.
Are there more questions? Please just throw them into the chat. If you don't see the chat window, just it should be at the bottom of the shared screen. If you hover at the bottom, there should be a chat window somewhere. Okay. So I mean, definitely also after my inputs on my session, we will have time for more questions. More than happy to also then maybe go back. Roland, if you're still around to stick around another maybe 30, 40 minutes. Cool, definitely. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to give you an introduction of what we see successful digital communication is really driving, and what experts do to be successful. I would want that you also just keep using the chat. I have it open, so if something comes up that I can answer it. I will also in between maybe really have the chat open somewhere, ask question where you just can give, for example, numbers. I will ask you a little bit 0 to 10, or maybe just yes, no, or such like, so we can get a little bit of interaction in this. So to start, right, maybe different start, I give you, or would like to start with a little bit of history in this sense. So we know that over millions of years, right, since basically humans and before that chimpanzees existed, that we learned to really, really trust our eyes. We rely on our eyes. It's the quickest thing to touch something. We were just recently going to a restaurant that is completely dark, and you could tell without the eyes, you don't even know what you eat. You lose a lot of information out there. So now imagine that you have your eyes covered, right? Not sure who saw Bird Box. So if you quickly just want to type in yes, if you have seen Bird Box, it's actually a Netflix movie where there is a hidden and never to be seen really disease or threat out there, and people need to cover their eyes to protect themselves. So if you haven't watched it, this is definitely very, very impactful. So imagine that, and how Sandra Bullock needed to fight and survive in the blind. So I see not many people have seen it yet, but maybe you can put it on the watch list now with home office. Maybe you find some time to actually do this. Now let's make it one step rougher, right? You don't only cover your eyes, but you also cover your ears. Right, so you put all these, you put on Sandra in this situation, you put also the noise canceling headphones on. And then it really gets difficult, right? But like, to be a little bit extreme, this is exactly the case in digital written communications, i.e. in email and chat. You don't see the other person. You don't hear the voice or the tonality or the small instant, yes, I understand, okay. It's also what Roland mentioned in his speech, right? He's normally seeing the audience and sees if somebody, like, everyone takes the mobile, so you can react to this. But if you don't, and just don't get any feedback, that makes it very, very difficult. And we actually call this the richness of communication. So if you have a continuum from not rich on the left, very much email, then a bit richer chat to face-to-face meetings, we have different things that really are lacking. So obviously, in each of them, you could say the same content, message can be conveyed. However, already on the first one, on instant, like you don't get instant feedback in email. It's asynchronous. So you send something, somebody else, the other person reads it somewhere down the line and in a totally different situation. Maybe things have changed in the meantime and then, so you don't get this, yeah, I get this, or I have a question in the first few paragraphs. Then also, obviously, you miss the hearing. You don't get the voice line, the tonality, the intonation, the pauses. Maybe you even hear the smile. You don't also see, right? This is why people currently in the situation of home office more and more are being just asked to use video calls, because then you see the other side, you get an impression, is this friendly, is this not, is the other person even paying attention, or just totally switching off. And the last one that you then really only get in the face-to-face is the feel. Also, obviously, I know that these days we shouldn't do the handshake, but it's definitely something that you can't mirror in the digital world. So very much you lose a lot of information. It's a low richness communication when you rely on email and or chat for that matter. With this, I would like to do a quick experiment when you can maybe also get the chat up again. So let's assume we are in this forest here, and, or no, not we, but we have somebody, a good friend is actually in this forest, but he has been blindfolded. Now we are on the phone and are trying to guide this person through and just making it to the end of the trees here. So how is it really? What kind of things would you say to make it possible? What would you do if you just type a little bit, like what could it be that you pay more attention to, knowing that the other person doesn't see what's in front of him or her, and you know the situation, you can see. I'm not sure how easy it is to get the chat up for everyone. Good, so you give clear instructions like what to do: walk, stand, left, right, stretch your arms, very smart, right, to protect. Reach out hands, yes, again, Aga, exactly. Stay right of what, right, of yourself maybe. Smell the paint, I love that. Go slowly, right? You give really very precise instructions, more verbose instructions than you might first think, because you will then see how the person reacts. So in this case, you see the instant reaction. However, again, in the digital communication in email, you might not see the instant reaction. So you don't see that the other person is just walking straight into the tree, hitting himself and not even realizing what just happened, because obviously thinking I just followed the instructions. So exactly that's what we would like or hope to see. Others already do that, right? We know that in naval communication or also in the flight space, there are code words, there are rules almost to abide by. So you say, copy that, over and out, clear. So you have all these codes or helpful instructions to make things more likely to go right, right? So now when we come to what expert communicators do when it comes to email communication, and I will just speak to email because it's the easiest one, it's the one that needs the most attention. So a good point to start is really the awareness that you will be misunderstood. So whatever you will be writing and putting into text, assume that the other person will misunderstand it. Take this as a base case and then try to improve from there. So how could you improve? Number one is really stating your intent. What are you wanting to do? Why is this email being sent? Right? Back in the days, we might remember that people, when they wrote a letter, in the beginning of the letter, they would always go, I'm writing to you to state or to express my deep appreciation for your friendship. Or I'm writing to you to complain about this situation, da, da, da. Right? So you would really make it clear up front, why are you writing? And this really helps to be in the right state of mind. A second thing is to be really clear and precise. We have seen before in the wood experiment or in the forest experiment that you should be more precise and clearer than you think you need to be. Also here, assume nothing is clear, right? And maybe state it again, obviously not overdoing it. Then also here, give more information. Also, for example, be open to give constructive feedback. We have seen it before with Roland's speech also that the mental model, when you don't give critical feedback, that's something you should overcome. But also on the other hand, give appreciation, say thanks, and say why exactly you're saying thanks, and be also there, be specific. Then don't forget to be human. Add in some small talk, show empathy, and focus on the we rather than me or I. Number 5 is ask questions, right? On the phone, actually it didn't come up, but you would ask questions. Did you understand? Do you know where you are? Do you feel the ground under you? Are you aware what you asked to be doing? Like really always double confirm and ask rather than tell. And the last thing also is before you hit send, just review, go over it, maybe put yourselves into the shoes of the receiver. How would you feel if you received this? How would you receive this when you're maybe in a negative mood at that point, right? Would it still be a viable message, or would it maybe overwhelm or feel attacked? Would the person feel attacked maybe? Right, so these are 6. There are obviously more things that you can do, but these are, in my opinion, the 6 most important and easiest thing you can do right now to actually start to become an expert email communicator. Now, again, to the chat. I would like you to go to the chat again, right? And just to tease a little bit, it's you knew that, right? There's nothing really new. If I asked you, would you agree that you knew these maybe 6 things from 1 to 10? 1, never heard of it, not aware, no clue that I should be doing this, to 10, yes, this is totally clear to me. What number would you give yourself? Agreeing 8, 9, 9. So people 10 even, 2 10s, right? 9. So we're getting quite high numbers in here, right? But then also we know that actually knowing isn't doing, right? We all know we should go to the gym. We all know we should eat healthy. We all know we should be nice to people. We should smile. We should say thanks, and then. But oftentimes we are just not doing it. And if we now just maybe switch and add numbers again from 0 to 10, how well are you actually doing this? How often are you reviewing your email before you send it? How often are you asking the questions? How often are you double confirming? How often are you really making sure not to tell? So we see some people who are very aware already, but generally I see the numbers dropping quite a bit. So 9.5, Marie-Françoise, very good, congratulations. We see also 5, 6, 6 with a sad smile. Yeah, it's obviously tough. So some people are already very much doing it, so congratulations. For all others, we might have a little help. And this is now showing our current solution that we are giving at the moment. Oops, why is it stopped? Oops. That we are giving at the moment free out for personal use as well. So you can just download by going on the link there, bit.ly/advisor-outlook at some point, or when we share the slides, obviously you can also then click on the links. But it's exactly what we're trying to do, is building this awareness and giving almost a coach next to you, or your personal trainer, to help you to ensure that you have a successful digital communication, making sure you stay in the positive, making sure that you are easy to read and understandable, that you don't focus on me all the time, but you focus on the we and how can we do this together. So this is bringing me to the end with a quick summary. So we should be aware that we are facing a challenge when it comes to email communication, and that we need to improve starting from there. That obviously we see, Sandra, that there are ways to do that, pretty simple ways that we know. So it's not about knowing, it's not the information that is lacking, but it's really the doing, and that potentially a coach in this sense can also support and help. With this, I would also like to open it again for more questions, feedback, inputs, also obviously to Roland's part. Just type in.
I actually have a question for the audience.
Even better.
And the question is, how easy or how challenging is it to follow a session like this via Zoom compared to a session in person? And the reason why I asked the question is, it takes a lot of energy on my side sometimes to follow these conversations on the Zoom. So if you take a scale from 1 to 10, and 1 is, you know, easy to follow, no problem, 10 is very challenging, where would you rate a session like this? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
Would you think that it depends also on the duration of the session? Easier in real life, kids around, it's obviously better for introverts. Yeah, actually it's, yeah, good point.
I'm curious how to improve this, because I'm facing this with myself very often. You know, sessions are long, sessions are intense. You don't see what's happening, so I'm struggling. So if there are any good ideas to improve this, let us know.
I think one next step could be to really that everyone tries to put the camera up, which then makes it very much, I mean, you would then almost need 2 screens to see on one how people are reacting. Are they following? Do you see question marks in their faces? Okay, I already see first people out, yeah, opening their camera. Actually, if you want, right, and feel like, just unmute yourself and add in also over voice. I think we can manage. Just try it out. Very cool to see faces. Yes, that helps. Maybe for the Q&A sessions, that could be a way to make it. Roland, do you see?
Yeah, some I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can wait. Maybe I can quickly.
I think maybe for the check-in and for the question session, it would help if you can see the person who speaks. You know, who asked the question.
All right.
I can see some now. Yeah, great.
So I can also do that. Oops. Not sure what you see now, actually. Any questions? Just feel free also to unmute yourself.
Now we can see you again.
Sorry. Yeah.
At least we tried.
Anything else in the chat? Looks better. Yes, I agree. I also agree to the earlier comment that big corporation, you're getting used to this. I'm also then always having the notes typed. That's much easier than going into a meeting and having it on paper. Slido, yes. Actually, I was trying to use the poll that is included in Zoom. It's still very primitive, and I need to experiment a bit more. But Slido is an alternative. Yes. home office mood, no pics this time. Like that. Maybe you should even have it in the invite, right? Make sure that you have your camera fired up, makes it easier for the speakers.
You get the poster, you know, for behind you.
Exactly.
Um,
Okay, no further questions?
There was one question I spotted about how you can, you know, if you have groups, how can you make groups behavior spread from groups to groups? It was at the somewhere up, I think someone asked. That's basically in complex contagion. It's about creating wide bridges between the groups. So if you think about it, people start to do stuff if they see it from if they are exposed to this new behavior multiple times, but if they also see it from multiple persons they trust. So if you want to have it spreading from group to group, you must make sure that between the groups you have wide bridges so that many people are showing it to many people, then it spreads. And that's actually what's happening in social media. And if you think about, you have these groups and these groups start to share and then they connect with other groups. And as more often you see it in other groups, because you're connected in many, desto more likely you will start to behave differently, hence rush down and buy toilet paper.
With that, the circle closes, right? Okay, one question coming in. What do you think the most common misunderstanding in communications? Roland, what is your expertise? What is your view?
So you said something super interesting before on your 6 rules, which I think is amazing actually, and we tend to forget it. I think you said state your intent. Yeah. Now, if you think about what we also try to give leaders or people in the organization as one of the most simplest tools. If you ask a question, state why you're asking the question. And the reason is simple. If you think about, I ask you a question, what your brain does, it widens first the possible solutions why I'm asking the question. And that's waste, because 90% of what you coming up in your brain, why I'm asking the question, might be wrong. And only 10% is right. So I think the most easiest way to improve the quality of a conversation is when you ask a question or when you state something, say why you state this. Because then your brain doesn't predict anymore what the background of the question could be. And as we know, it predicts also very often negatively, because our brain is also wired towards the negative, because that's the way how we survived. So if you start to state this, and you can try it out tomorrow, the quality of the conversations, written or verbal, will increase massively. And you might have heard me before when I asked my question, I actually said why I asked the question, because I find it challenging. So you immediately know what is the context, why do I ask? And this is something I think is a simple thing and very widely not used. As mentioned, you have a fantastic list of these 6 items.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that makes it also, you don't go, oh, he wants to attack me, or if I answer the wrong way, then it's used against me. No, I just need it because I need to fill in the form or whatever, right? So I don't also need the long answer.
Your brain now is wired, he wants to attack me, which is interesting, you know. It could be also want to appreciate you. But that's how our brain works. It's wired towards the negative.
Evolution. I think it's also in thinking fast and slow that in the ancient times it was always smart to run away if it could be. So that's system 1, just reacting and running away, even if it's a mouse. And these days when it's not so dangerous, and again now fight or flight, exactly, when it's not so dangerous anymore, maybe it's not so smart to run. Maybe it's even more smart to stay and actually investigate, or just ask, what is it? Who are you? What is it in the bush? And maybe somebody says, yeah, it's me.
Or be second last. You know, second last is always safe.
Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. Also, if you have feedback afterwards, we will send the slides for all the people where we have the emails. We don't have the emails for the people who came through the meetup. So maybe just reach out to us if you want to get the slides, or if you have any feedback that you would like to share with us. That's very much appreciated. I would also like to take the opportunity again to say thanks to Roland. Highly appreciated. I think very good elements, at least also for us, that we can take away right away. And yes, to all of you, stay healthy, keep washing your hands, and stay home.
Thanks a lot. It was a great pleasure, and feedback would be highly welcome. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.